were very sensitive to putting black men in dresses. And they heaped that on me.
It's all affecting
something that's already solid and tangible.
Yeah, and
let me tell you.
What if the last message you ever received from a friend was a whisper you didn't hear until it was too late? For Jaleel White, the man once beloved as Steve Urkel, that whisper came from someone the world had almost forgotten. Malcolm-Jamal Warner. Not Theo, not a sitcom character, but a man quietly unraveling behind the scenes. They were never seen together on screen, never posed on red carpets. And yet, a silent thread connected them. Two child stars from Black America's golden TV age who learned how to smile on cue while slowly breaking inside. And on the night Malcolm vanished into the ocean, leaving behind a voice note Jaleel didn't open until it was too late.
So I want to talk about this embarrassing moment for Us Weekly where they mistakenly posted a photo of Jaleel White in place of Malcolm-Jamal Warner to announce his death.
Everything changed. This isn't just a story about two actors. It's about what happens when fame fades and no one's left to hear you fall. They didn't grow up chasing stardom, it came looking for them. Jaleel White was just a kid when he first walked onto the set of Family Matters. He wasn't even cast as a main character. The role of Steve Urkel was a throwaway gag, a quirky neighbor meant to appear once and disappear. But the audience had other plans. With his squeaky voice, oversized glasses, and heart on his sleeve innocence, Jaleel didn't just steal the scene, he stole the entire show. Within a season, Steve Urkel became a cultural phenomenon. T-shirts, dolls, catchphrases, even cereal boxes.
For now, let's move into Chapter 2 and take a closer look at the tragic circumstances of Malcolm-Jamal Warner's unexpected.
America fell in love with the kid who made nerdiness endearing. But behind the suspenders was a boy who felt his real identity slipping. As the show's ratings climbed, so did the pressure to stay frozen in time. Urkel wasn't just a role anymore, it was a brand. And Jaleel, he was expected to live inside it. Across the country, another young actor was navigating the same tightrope. Malcolm-Jamal Warner had already become the face of Black boyhood on American television. As Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show, he was smart, funny, imperfect, but always lovable. His on-screen family represented the kind of safe, successful household millions of Americans dreamed about.
Malcolm-Jamal Warner unfortunately passed away this week. God rest his soul, rest in peace. US Weekly.
But while the country saw a model's son, Malcolm began to wonder if they ever really saw him. Over 8 seasons and more than 200 episodes, Malcolm grew up in front of the camera. But once the final curtain fell, the world refused to let go of Theo. No matter what he accomplished, directing, spoken word poetry, even a Grammy-winning music career, his name was always tethered to a sitcom that had ended decades ago. Theo from The Cosby Show. That was the chain. And no matter how far he ran, it never let go. Both Jaleel and Malcolm had become more than actors. They were symbols, representations of Black success in a time when those images were still rare on television.
Jaleel White finally breaks his silence on the last words of Malcolm-Jamal Warner. In a deeply emotional interview,
but symbols don't get to grow up. They don't get to change. They don't get to be tired. And that's where their stories quietly converged. They had never shared a stage or headline together. Most fans didn't even know they were close. But beneath the surface, these two young boys turned men were learning to carry the same burden, being loved for who they used to be, while slowly disappearing in the present. Jaleel would later say, "I wasn't allowed to grow up in the eyes of the audience." And Malcolm, in a journal no one read until after his death, wrote, "I'm not Theo anymore, I haven't been him for decades, but to the world, I'll never be anyone else." Fame gave them a platform, but it also gave them a prison.
Welcome back to our channel. For years, fans all around the world have known Jaleel White and Malcolm-Jamal Warner.
And yet, in the silence between applause, something rare and invisible began to form. a quiet bond, one that would carry them through rejection, through reinvention, and eventually through goodbye. They were never photographed together. No talk show reunions, no nostalgic sit-downs, no staged hugs at awards shows. In the public eye, Jaleel White and Malcolm-Jamal Warner were two entirely separate chapters of Black television history. But off-screen, away from the buzz and lights, they shared something more powerful than fame: understanding. Their friendship wasn't built in dressing rooms or green rooms. It was formed in the quiet.
The unexpected and mysterious death of Malcolm-Jamal Warner has not only shocked fans, it's shattered the quiet brotherhood of the
In the silence that creeps in when the audience goes home and the laughter stops. When you're no longer playing a role and the world no longer knows what to do with you. It started with late-night phone calls, no agenda, no camera-ready smiles, just two men who had survived the same strange war, growing up as America's favorite Black boys, only to become invisible once the credits rolled. They never had to explain that feeling to each other. It was just understood. They didn't talk about scripts. They talked about the weight, about walking into auditions and watching casting directors flinch, not because they weren't talented, but because their faces came with history.
I think I've seen it all.
A face that reminded the world of a sitcom, not a serious actor. A laugh track, not a legacy. Jaleel once said, "There were moments I wanted to disappear from Hollywood entirely." And it was Malcolm who called him in those moments, not to coach, not to comfort, just to remind him, we weren't made to be Urkel and Theo forever, but we were born to keep standing. It wasn't a motivational quote, it was a lifeline. Because when you've grown up as a product, scripted, scheduled, and sold to millions, just being seen as a human being becomes revolutionary. They both knew what it was like to outgrow the roles that made them famous, and then realize the world had no place for who they'd become. Maybe that's why they kept their bond private.
Jamal Warner and his entire family and everybody who was touched by this man's life. But this is just
not out of shame, but out of self-preservation. Because for Black men in Hollywood, vulnerability has always been dangerous. And friendship, the real kind, the quiet kind, was one of the few things no one could exploit. No one ever asked how they stayed friends for decades. But maybe the answer was simple. They didn't need to be seen to feel seen. And that invisible thread between them, strengthened in silence, stretched across time. To the outside world, they were lucky. Two child stars who'd made it. Faces on primetime television, featured on lunchboxes, quoted in playgrounds. They were success stories, role models, icons.
Now we finally have an update on the drowning death of Malcolm-Jamal Warner. Now, according to ABC7, they stated that Malcolm-Jamal Warner had drowned.
But no one ever asked what happened after the laughter stopped. By the time Jaleel turned 20, Steve Urkel wasn't a character. He was a cage. He tried shedding the suspenders, the voice, the quirky persona. He auditioned for serious roles, mature scripts, anything that would let him evolve. But every room he walked into, the casting directors didn't see an actor. They saw a memory. And memories don't grow up. In one interview, Jaleel confessed, "I wasn't allowed to become a man. They wanted me to stay 12 years old forever." Malcolm understood that prison better than anyone. When The Cosby Show ended in 1992, he made a quiet decision.
What's good? Yes, I got the flower in my hair. Today's my daughter's birthday.
No more sitcoms. He stepped back from the spotlight and turned toward the shadows. Directing, spoken word, jazz. He wasn't running from Theo. He was trying to find Malcolm. And he did. Sort of. He became a respected artist, earning praise in underground scenes, collecting a Grammy in 2015, appearing in dramatic roles far removed from his sitcom past. But still, no matter how far he ran, the introduction was always the same. That's Malcolm-Jamal Warner, Theo. a name, a role, a reminder that the world still hadn't let go of who he used to be. Malcolm once wrote in his journal,
"This is where the Cosby Show star Malcolm-Jamal Warner's life suddenly and shockingly ended over the weekend. You can see right now there's a red flag."
I used to wonder when people would stop looking at me through the lens of their own nostalgia. That line didn't sound bitter, it sounded exhausted. And the more they tried to evolve, the more the world resisted. Because when Black actors break the mold, the industry rarely follows. It freezes them in place. Funny, lovable, non-threatening. And if they dare to step beyond that box, the applause turns to silence. They were applauded for being characters, but punished for trying to be complex. Through all of it, the late-night calls between Jaleel and Malcolm kept going. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they just listened to each other breathe. Because when you've spent your entire life performing...
Bro. What? The actor Malcolm-Jamal Warner has died. First of all, rest in peace to him.
The greatest kindness is silence that doesn't ask for anything back. It wasn't about fixing each other. It was about surviving together. About knowing that someone out there had walked the same tightrope and fallen the same way, but still got back up. And in those quiet moments, they weren't Urkel and Theo. They were just two men trying to outgrow the applause that had once made them feel invincible, and now felt like chains. Malcolm never said goodbye, not with words anyone recognized at the time. But those who knew him best would later realize he'd been saying it all along. 3 weeks before the news broke, Jaleel got a late-night call. Nothing unusual. Their conversations had always happened after midnight when the world was quiet enough to speak the truth.
It's been 23 years since we were both on the Cosby Show, and let's take a quick trail down memory lane.
But something felt different this time. Malcolm wasn't angry, wasn't sad. He sounded still, like someone rearranging thoughts he wasn't planning to say again. "It's not about fame anymore, Jay," Malcolm said softly. "It's legacy, but who's gonna tell my story?" Jaleel didn't know how to answer. He thought Malcolm was venting, frustrated with another project that wasn't getting the attention it deserved. But looking back, he would remember the pause that followed that question, the kind of silence you don't notice until it echoes later. In the weeks that followed, the signs became harder to ignore. Malcolm canceled 2 performances in Atlanta with no explanation.
I'd be remiss not to ask you, obviously, today we heard the news of Malcolm-Jamal Warner as well. You guys both on TV around the same time.
A podcast appearance, something he'd committed to months before, vanished from the schedule. His social media posts turned poetic, almost cryptic. Poems about time, fading echoes, water, and then came the final performance. It wasn't a televised tribute or a sold-out farewell, just a private gathering of Black artists in a Brooklyn loft. No stage lights, just candles. Malcolm read one last spoken word piece. A single line left the room breathless. "I leave my footprints on water so no one can keep them, but still know I was here." It was haunting, beautiful, and, in hindsight, deeply final.
On July 20th, Malcolm-Jamal Warner drowned while swimming with his daughter at a beach in Costa Rica. He was caught up in a rip current. I'm Dr.
Because footprints on water don't last. They disappear almost as quickly as they appear, leaving nothing behind but memory and mystery. On July 20th, 2025, the news came quietly. No red alerts, no scandal, just a short headline. Malcolm-Jamal Warner, 54, found dead in apparent drowning off coast of Costa Rica. No drugs, no pre-existing condition, just a man and the ocean. But for Jaleel, it wasn't sudden, not really. Hours after the headlines began to circulate, he opened his phone and saw something buried beneath hundreds of missed notifications. A voice note, unopened, sent at 3:12 a.m. He almost didn't press play.
We had such good times together. I was probably 18 at Malcolm.
But when he did, everything stopped. The message was just 52 seconds long, no background noise, no hesitation, just Malcolm's voice, calm and slow, like a wave receding. "Jay, This world is loud and rushed, but in silence we find truth. If I don't make it to tomorrow, just know the ocean gave me peace. Don't cry for me, bro. Carry me in your work. That was it. No one else heard it. Jaleel never shared the audio publicly. He called it sacred, played it only once, for a small circle of loved ones in a dark room with no music, no cameras, just candles. One guest later said, "No one sobbed, but everyone cried because we knew that was the final goodbye, and it was written in stillness."
Now we finally have an update on the drowning death of Malcolm-Jamal Warner. Now, according to ABC7, they stated that Malcolm-Jamal Warner had drowned while...
There were no red carpets, no TV specials, no trending hashtags. When Malcolm-Jamal Warner was laid to rest, it wasn't a spectacle. It was a whisper. A small room in Los Angeles, dimly lit by flickering candles and filled with people who had known the man, not just the memory. There were no speeches planned, no press releases, no celebrities posing for the camera, only grief. At the center of the room sat an empty chair. Beside it, placed gently on the seat cushion, was Malcolm's black fedora, the one he always wore during his poetry readings. And behind it, a single photograph. Malcolm staring out a window, pen in hand as if he'd just paused mid-thought. That chair wasn't just empty, it was sacred.
We bereaved. Now I'm gone. Malcolm-Jamal Warner. No, he ain't.
When Jaleel White stepped forward, no one needed an introduction. He didn't speak as Steve Urkel, he didn't even speak as a TV actor. He spoke as a friend trying to say goodbye, but instead of comfort, he offered confrontation. His voice barely rose above a whisper at first. "This isn't just about Malcolm," he began. "This is about everything we've done wrong to people like him." The room went still. People expected stories, maybe a laugh, a warm memory, something soft. But Jaleel didn't come to soothe. He came to expose something raw, something even he had ignored for years. We, the Black kids who grew up on television, we were taught to hold ourselves together, to smile through rejection, to never appear weak.
Breaking television and film news, it has just been confirmed that actor Malcolm-Jamal Warner has unfortunately passed away at the age of 54 years.
Because if the audience saw us tired, they might never come back. His voice cracked, but he kept going. He spoke of 2 a.m. phone calls, of Malcolm breathing on the other end of the line, not complaining, not asking, just trying to be heard. He recalled the night Malcolm whispered, "I don't know if anyone still sees me, or if they only see Theo." At the time, Jaleel had responded casually, "Go to sleep, man. Tomorrow will be better." But now, he wasn't so sure that had been the right thing to say. Maybe he didn't need me to comfort him. Maybe he needed me to see him as a person, not as a symbol. Then he paused, walked slowly to the empty chair, looked down at the fedora. His next words didn't rise. They fell.
Malcolm-Jamal Warner's ex-girlfriend, actress Regina King, has been trending online since the news broke. Many of you may remember.
"You weren't just Theo, Malcolm. You were my brother, and I won't let them forget who you were." He picked up the hat and gently placed it on the seat. A gesture so simple, yet so final. Not a performance, a promise. Someone in the room, without meaning to, had recorded the audio. It leaked online within hours, but it wasn't a scandal, it was a turning point. A single clip of Jaleel's whisper circled TikTok and Twitter like a candle in the dark. He wasn't angry, he was just tired. One comment read, "That wasn't a memorial, that was a torch being passed." And that's exactly what it was, because from that moment on, Malcolm-Jamal Warner wasn't just remembered as Theo.
The news of Malcolm's death continued to spread like wildfire, but what came next made people question everything. The initial autopsy listed
he was remembered as a man who had lived, struggled, created, and quietly asked to be understood. And Jaleel, once the boy trapped in a sitcom laugh track, had just become his voice. After the funeral, Malcolm-Jamal Warner's home sat in silence, the kind of silence that feels permanent. His family returned not to grieve aloud, but to sort through the life he left behind. Photos, old scripts, sheet music, from half-finished jazz compositions. They weren't expecting to find anything new. Malcolm had always been private, even with those closest to him. But then, tucked deep inside a worn leather bag, beneath loose pages of lyrics and poetry drafts,
an actor many of us grew up watching has passed away. Malcolm-Jamal Warner, who millions knew as Theo on The Cosby Show,
they found something unexpected. A thick, weathered journal. No title, no dates on the cover. Just page after page of handwritten words. Some neat, some frantic, all raw. It wasn't a memoir. It wasn't for publication. It was something far more honest. A whisper from a man who had learned how to stay quiet in public, but never stopped screaming on paper. The first page read, "I feel like I'm drowning with a smile on my face, screaming underwater while everyone waves from the shore." Not poetic, not polished, just real. A line from someone who had lived too long performing emotions that no longer belonged to him.
Malcolm-Jamal Warner tragically passed away at the age of 54, but remembering his legacy, we have to remember he did something very right, correcting a big wrong.
The entries weren't daily. They stretched across years, sometimes months apart. But the theme never changed. They spoke of being erased, of the exhaustion that comes from being everyone's memory but no one's present reality. I'm not Theo anymore. I haven't been him for decades. But to the world, I'll never be anyone else. Even walking down the street, he wrote, he didn't feel seen. People didn't recognize him. They recognized their own nostalgia. Childhood memories wrapped in his face, and it left him asking a question that few ever dared to say aloud. If I'm no longer who they remember, am I still worth remembering at all? But the journal didn't stay dark forever. Toward the final pages, something shifted.
No one realized that Malcolm-Jamal Warner's drowning death stemmed from an act of kindness, and his family still cannot accept it.
The entries began to reveal a man trying, desperately, to transform pain into purpose. He started therapy. He began writing outlines for a show, not a sitcom, not a comedy, but a raw, unscripted project that would tackle a subject TV rarely touches: the emotional lives of Black men. He wrote, "I want to create something for people like me, people who made the world laugh but were never allowed to cry in public. I want to show that healing isn't pretty, that silence isn't strength, it's survival." There were no scripts, no producers, no signed deals, just notes, half-formed, unfinished, but filled with urgency.
I love the fact that I can't find this man's wife nor kids on social media or anywhere for that matter.
The final page wasn't marked the end. Instead, in slightly crooked handwriting, it simply said, "If this ends, promise me someone will read it and finally see me." That promise is now being kept. Malcolm's family, along with Jaleel and a handful of close friends, are working to edit and release parts of the journal. Not for profit, not for spectacle, but because Malcolm asked, in his own quiet way, to be remembered as more than a rerun. He never got to finish the project he dreamed of. But maybe, through these pages, someone else will. Malcolm-Jamal Warner didn't die in scandal. He didn't leave behind headlines or viral outrage. There were no flashing cameras, no press conferences, no hashtags that trended for a day and disappeared the next.
For now, let's move into Chapter 2 and take a closer look at the tragic circumstances of Malcolm-Jamal Warner's unexpected.
He left in silence, but somehow that silence echoed louder than any shout. At first, it was just a few voices. Former co-stars, quiet creatives, background actors and poets who had once shared a stage or a late-night conversation with him. They didn't speak in cliches or tweet out rehearsed eulogies. They spoke with something rarer: regret. A realization that maybe, just maybe, they had spent years watching Malcolm the symbol while never really seeing Malcolm the man. And then more voices joined, sitcom actors who had once carried the weight of a single role for decades. Screenwriters pushed out of writers' rooms for being too honest. Black men in entertainment who had been told their sadness was bad for ratings.
I think the turning point for Theo was when they diagnosed him with dyslexia. And that was at
They began telling their own stories. It wasn't a trend, it was a reckoning. Across social media, a quiet wave formed. Not just Rip Malcolm, but something deeper. Remember the person. A movement, unplanned and unbranded, began to grow. Artists who had long felt silenced by nostalgia began reclaiming their right to be real, their right to evolve, their right to be more than the roles they were once celebrated for. One young Black actor posted a video with tears in his eyes. I never met Malcolm, but because of him, I stopped forcing a smile when my heart was breaking. Another, an indie filmmaker, shared a photo of a dusty script titled Still Laughing, Still Drowning, a project about depression in Black comedians that had sat untouched for 6 years.
Hollywood is reeling, but no one is hurting more than Lisa Bonet. After years of silence and unanswered questions,
I shelved this because I was afraid no one would care, he wrote. But now I know Malcolm would have watched it. That's enough. Even inside Hollywood, where image is everything, change began to crack through the surface. Silent gestures at first. Showrunners revisiting old characters with more depth. Casting directors calling in actors they hadn't considered in years. Small steps, but steps all the same. And at the center of it was a man who had once asked in his journal, "If I'm no longer Theo, am I still worth remembering?" The answer came not in applause, but in action. Jaleel White, carrying the weight of that final voice note, didn't return to the spotlight with a memoir or a documentary deal.
Okay, I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. First of all, condolences to Malcolm-Jamal.
He didn't chase a comeback. He chose something harder. He chose silence, stillness. And in that stillness, he began honoring Malcolm's legacy not with noise, but with purpose. Not through another character, but through truth. Because what Malcolm left behind wasn't just a diary. It wasn't just pain, it was a spark. And now, everywhere you look, on stages, in scripts, in quiet videos posted from bedrooms and basements, you can feel the fire catching. A legacy not built on reruns, but on revolution. Malcolm-Jamal Warner didn't vanish in anger. He didn't leave a trail of bitterness or broken relationships. He left something far more haunting: peace. Don't cry for me, bro. Carry me in your work.
Actor Malcolm-Jamal Warner has sadly passed away at the age of 54. TMZ is just broke.
Those were his final words to Jaleel White, not a plea. A passing of the torch, a charge only a brother could understand. And that's exactly what Jaleel has done. Not with noise, not with a performance, but with quiet, unwavering resolve. He never posted the voice note, never turned it into content, because to him, it wasn't a moment, it was a message. In a private gathering weeks after the funeral, Jaleel played the recording one last time. Candles flickered. The room stayed still, and as Malcolm's voice echoed into the silence, no one clapped. No one spoke. One guest whispered, "That wasn't a memorial. That was a vow."
Actor Malcolm-Jamal Warner has sadly passed away at the age of 54. TMZ is just broke.
Because this story was never just about two actors. It was about what happens when the world forgets the person behind the performance. When the applause fades, but the pressure doesn't. When legacy becomes a mirror that only reflects who you used to be. Malcolm's death didn't end a story, it exposed one. The story of Black men in entertainment expected to smile forever. The story of artists remembered for what they gave the world, but rarely asked what they needed in return. And now, through that quiet goodbye, people are beginning to listen. Not just to Malcolm, but to every man who once brought joy to millions and then disappeared into silence.
Yeah, these hurt. Yesterday we learned of the passing of Malcolm-Jamal Warner. Warner had several film and television.
Every artist who was told to be strong, be funny, be grateful, but never told, be human. Malcolm once wrote, "If I disappear, don't be sad. Just make sure they remember me for who I truly was." And now, they are. He's no longer just Theo. He's no longer just the punchline or the memory or the rerun. He's the poet who left footprints on water. The friend who reminded us that silence isn't weakness. It's a language, one we've forgotten how to hear, And maybe, just maybe, that's the most powerful goodbye of all. Not one shouted into the world, but whispered to someone who finally understood.